In the heart of Africa, a leader rises against the weight of centuries of oppression, standing alone in the face of unimaginable odds. With every step, they challenge a system built to silence them, a system that has crushed hope for generations. But when the world watches, will this leader crumble under the pressure, or will they ignite a movement that will forever change the course of history? This is the story of defiance, resilience, and a fight for justice that no one saw coming. What happens when a single voice refuses to stay quiet? Stay tuned to find out. In a small village in eastern Africa, nestled between rolling hills and vast savannas, a young leader named Amara rose to prominence. Born into a family of farmers, she had always seen the world through the lens of hard work, hope, and community. Her father, a respected elder, taught her early on the values of justice and unity, but also the bitter reality that change came slowly, if at all. Amara had always been different. Where others saw the village's struggles as inevitable, she saw possibilities. As a child, she would walk for hours to the nearby city, learning from anyone willing to share knowledge about governance, justice, and the fight for freedom. By the time she was an adult, Amara had become a respected voice among the people, not just for her wisdom, but for her unwavering belief that the oppressed could rise above their circumstances. But there was one thing Amara couldn't ignore. The whispers of corruption in the government had begun to seep into her village, promising false hope in exchange for loyalty. The elderly leaders who once guided the community were now too afraid to speak out. Amara, however, could not turn a blind eye. She knew that to protect her people, she would have to challenge an unjust system that had ruled for decades. In the quiet mornings, she would often stand by the river, staring out across the horizon. The weight of her responsibility was heavy, but she never wavered. The people looked to her, and she knew that a decision was coming, one that would either lead to freedom or force her to make the ultimate sacrifice. Little did she know, the winds of change were about to blow through her life in ways she could never have imagined. The stage was set. The world was about to see how one woman's fight for justice would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything. Amara's first encounter with the full force of the system came on a humid afternoon when the government officials arrived in the village. They had come to announce a new law, one that would seize the land from farmers to build a private development, a project that promised wealth, but for a few, not the many. At first, the villagers thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Surely, this could not be true. But Amara knew better. She had seen the signs, the whispers, the meetings held behind closed doors, the sudden silence from the elders, who once stood as pillars of truth. The law wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of something far worse. The land was the heart of their village, the only thing they had left that truly belonged to them. Without it, they would lose everything. Amara's heart pounded as she stood before the village, her people looking to her for guidance. The officials gave their rehearsed speech, offering compensation that barely covered a fraction of what the land was worth. But Amara's eyes were fixed on the man speaking, his face cold, devoid of any real empathy. He was a puppet of the powers that be, a representative of a system that had long ago abandoned the people it was supposed to serve. When the speech ended, the villagers sat in stunned silence. The words of the official hung in the air, heavy with the weight of injustice. Amara stepped forward, her voice unwavering as she addressed the crowd. "This land is not for sale. This land is ours," she declared, her words sharp as they cut through the stillness. The official's eyes narrowed. "You should be careful, Miss Amara. We wouldn't want things to escalate," he warned, his voice dripping with thinly veiled threat. But Amara stood firm. She knew the stakes. The villagers were depending on her now. They couldn't afford to back down. As the days passed, the tension in the village grew. Whispers turned into outright defiance. The villagers began to gather at night, strategizing and discussing how they could stop the land seizure. But the government was relentless. Soldiers appeared at the edge of the village, their presence a constant reminder of the power that stood against them. One night, as Amara walked to the meeting place, she was stopped by one of her closest allies, a man named Temba. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "They know," he whispered urgently. "They know about the meetings. They're coming for us." Before Amara could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the alley. The government soldiers had arrived. They moved swiftly, their boots pounding the ground, their weapons drawn. Amara's heart raced. She knew this was only the beginning. The night was dark, the streets empty except for the gathering storm. As the soldiers advanced, Amara turned to Temba. "Get everyone to safety. I'll handle this." It was a risk, a huge one, but she had no choice. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about the soul of her people, their dignity, their right to exist on their own terms. With a final glance at Temba, Amara stood tall and walked toward the approaching soldiers. "Stop right there," the lead soldier barked, blocking her path. "You're making a mistake, Amara. This could end badly for you." Amara didn't flinch. "The only mistake here is your belief that you can take what's not yours," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the night. The soldier raised his rifle, and for a moment, everything went still. Time seemed to freeze. This was the moment when everything could change. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke. The villagers watched from their hiding places, their eyes glued to the confrontation unfolding before them. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the soldier lowered his rifle. "You're lucky tonight," he muttered, his voice full of contempt. "But don't think this is over." Amara held her ground, refusing to back down, even as the soldier and his men retreated. Her heart raced, her mind spinning with the weight of what had just happened. She had stood up, but the danger was far from over. The fight had only just begun. That night, as Amara lay awake, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate beyond what she had imagined. The government's response would be swift and brutal. She knew they wouldn't let her challenge them without consequences. The question now was, how far was she willing to go to protect her people, and at what cost? The dust eventually settled, but not without cost. The soldiers retreated, not because the village had surrendered, but because the unyielding spirit of its people had become a force too powerful to ignore. The fires had been put out, the wreckage left behind, but the message had been sent. Amara and her people would never back down. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the story of the village's resistance spread like wildfire across the continent. It was a symbol, not just of one leader's fight, but of the power of unity in the face of injustice. Amara's bravery had sparked a movement, a wave of hope that rippled across borders, uniting communities who had long felt powerless against the forces of corruption and oppression. The officials' plan to seize the land was eventually thwarted, but the victory went beyond the tangible. The villagers had reclaimed their dignity, proving that even the smallest voices, when united, could challenge the might of a corrupt system. Amara, though scarred by the struggle, stood taller than ever. She knew that true leadership wasn't just about winning battles. It was about inspiring others to rise, to demand change, and to fight for the future they deserved. The movement she had ignited was not hers alone. It belonged to every person who had ever felt oppressed, every leader who had dared to stand for justice, every community that had suffered in silence. This story is more than just the tale of one leader. It is a reflection of Africa's ongoing struggle for unity, justice, and self-determination. It reminds us that the road to true freedom is not easy, but it is worth walking, step by step, side by side. As you watch this, ask yourself, what will you do when faced with the choice to stand for what's right? Will you remain silent, or will you rise and be the change your community so desperately needs?